Today on Extreme Reloading, we are going to begin tackling powder. There's a lot to say about powder, and in a previous episode we did talk some about powder. We talked about single base and double base powders and kind of the variety and some considerations about powder for our rifle and pistol reloads. And in the previous episode of Extreme Reloading, we primed those cases that we had been working on all through this entire season of Extreme Reloading. I took those 5.56 Federal Champion cases and I primed them with Federal AR Match small rifle primers. And I also primed those CCI Blazer 9mm brass cases with very similar, it might seem like, Federal GM, that's gold medal, 100M, that's match, small pistol primers. So very similar, small primers, match in both cases. Of course, one is a pistol primer, the other was a rifle primer. Well, the next step after you put the primers in those cases is adding the powder. Since the emphasis in this season of Extreme Reloading is bare essentials all the way through Extreme, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about those bare essentials of powder, smokeless powder. For instance, what powder do I use? What powder do I use for 5.56? And what powder do I use for 9mm or 30-06 or 308 Winchester, all those sorts of things? For those of us who have been reloading for some time, you could talk to me, or you could talk to other more seasoned reloaders out there and ask them, hey, I'm going to reload for my 308 Winchester. What powder do I use? And you're likely going to hear, oh, the best powder for 308 Winchester is that powder right there, this one. Oh, I've been using it for decades. It's the greatest thing in the whole wide world. Or for 5.56, this is the best powder, or whatever. You get the idea. If someone tells you that, understand that is not correct. There is no such thing as the best powder for 5.56 or the best powder for 308, etc. There is, however, the best powder for your rifle, your bullet that you've chosen to use in that specific caliber. Because what you're doing is you want to select a powder that works well with the bullet, your rifle, and so on and so forth. So you're going to get down to your best powder, but across the board there is no such thing as a best powder. There are some powders that are very easy to use in a wide variety of calibers, or they are applicable for use in a wide variety of calibers. And two of those powders that fit that bill are right here. Unique is a powder that is extremely versatile. It can be used in shotguns. It's used a lot in shotguns. I use it a lot in shotguns. But even more so, I use it in a variety of pistol loads. Everything from my 44 Magnum to 45 ACP to 9mm and so on. Really a versatile powder. Not necessarily the best powder, but very, very versatile. Another powder, extremely versatile, is Varget. This is Hodgdon's Varget. Yeah, and it can be loaded in lots of different cartridges. 223, 308. There's even a listing here for 375 H&H Magnum. I don't own one of those, but that is a really versatile rifle powder. But you know what they say, the jack of all trades is the master of none. So maybe Varget isn't the best powder for any of those particular things. Although, I don't know, Varget is really, really a good powder. So is Unique. Well, how do you discover this, the best powder for your rifle, your handgun, the bullet that you're using? Well, that's some of the fun of reloading, is trying this different stuff. And I understand And in today's market, it's difficult to get lots of different powder, and you certainly don't want to buy 8 pounds of Varget if it doesn't work out for you. So you look for those 1-pound canisters, and if it doesn't work out, well, maybe you'll end up shooting it with another caliber some other day, or just make some blasting ammo, range practice ammo with it, those sorts of things. So that's okay. But it actually is a good idea to pick up a few different powders that maybe a couple of different people are telling you, or you see online, this is really a good powder for 5.56, this is really a good powder for 308 or whatever. There's almost a dizzying array of powder manufacturers and powder types available out there on the market today. Well, they're being made, but they're oftentimes, almost every one of them is hard to get a hold of. But some of those manufacturers to watch for, definitely, some of my favorite manufacturers are Hodgdon. We already talked about that. That is the manufacturer of Varget. Alliant is another one. Alliant is the company that makes Unique. Years ago, it was called Hercules powder. And not too long ago, I found I still had a can laying around here that still was called Hercules. IMR, that's Improved Military Rifle powder, is another one. Winchester makes some powders. Accurate makes quite a number of different powders. And then, of course, there's also Vitavuri. Now, I have not used Vitavuri powders in quite a long time. Didn't work out for me. I loaded that years ago in my 338 Win Mag. Didn't really work out. Just kind of got rid of it and haven't used any other Vitavuri powders. So I can't tell you too much about those. I use a little bit of Winchester powder, not very much at all. But the great majority of the powders that I use are Hodgdon, number one, no doubt, Hodgdon powders, and then Alliant and Accurate powders. While I use Accurate 2230 and Hodgdon's Varget for my 5.56, I'm not going to talk much about Accurate 2230 today because I'm not loading it today. Today I am going to be using Hodgdon's Varget, and later on I'm going to be using Alliant's Unique for the 9mm Luger. Well, how did I come to choose those particular powders? Because there are a lot of powders available. Well, the first place to start is in your reloading manual. Hopefully you have at least one reloading manual. This is the original reloading manual that came with my kit, my press that I bought in the 1980s. This is the book, and I still use it. Kind of interesting, and it's still very applicable, good information. This is the place to start. You may have more than one reloading manual available to you. Here's the 11th edition of Hornady's reloading manual. Now got a couple of years on it as well. And I also have Lyman's manual, 50th edition of the Lyman manual. And sometimes I'll kind of bookmark some of these things for individual charges I want to look at again. But of course, in today's world, you don't have to have all this stuff printed, and you certainly don't need to go out and buy a new reloading manual every single year come around January 1st. There is tremendously excellent, very good information available by going to, let's say, Hodgdon's Load Data website. Just fantastic information. Some of these other companies, Hornady and a couple of other companies, will put out some additional reloading data online. Sometimes you have to pay for that access. Other times you don't. Hodgdon's has always been free of charge, and it is really some excellent information. One of the benefits, though, of having one of these actual reloading manuals is the first couple pages. The first X number of pages in here are focused on the absolute fundamentals of reloading. So pick up one of these, whichever you might want, whatever kind of find might be a better deal, that's okay. Save a little bit of money that way. But read that first section or first few chapters. Really, really good and important information. So let me go back to this Lyman manual right here, and I'm going to page over to the, let's say, 223 Remington. And I don't think that they make any distinction between loads for 223 Remington versus the 5.56. We talked all about those differences earlier, so that should not surprise you whatsoever. But let's say that I'm going to be reloading for a 69 grain bullet. I find the 69 grain bullets are really, really an excellent choice for the 5.56. And so here is a 69 grain loading, and I have a recipe being shown here for 2015 powder, IMR 8208 XBR powder. Just a whole bunch of different powders listed here, including Varget. Varget is in bold right here, and that simply means that they found that Varget works very well, or as they say, is potentially the most accurate load with this particular bullet that they're shooting, a 69 grain jacketed hollow point boat tail. They're being relatively generic there, and that's cool. That's really good. Just understand that if your 69 grain bullet is a solid copper bullet, then you really can't use this data directly. You should look for specific load data for that solid copper bullet, because these generic bullets that are being shown are a traditional lead core. So they're going to be much shorter in overall length of the bullet in comparison to a all-metal bullet of the same weight. Lead is much heavier than copper or brass, etc. And so because of that, to achieve 69 grains in a 224 diameter bullet, that's got to be longer if it's solid copper. That just makes sense. And because of that, if we're going to achieve the same combined overall length or cartridge overall length when we finish reloading, well, if the tip of that bullet is here in both cases, then that means the base of the bullet for that longer bullet is going to be inside the case all the more. And that means not so much room for powder. That means more pressure is going to be built up much, much faster. So be very careful about that whenever you see sort of the generic bullet listed. And they are saying, by the way, that the starting charge, all the way on the left side there, suggested starting charge in grains is 23.4 grains. That's good. Now, when you see that minimum charge, don't think to yourself, I'm going to be really cautious and careful. I'm going to go even less than that. That's going to be just the smartest way to do it. No, don't do that. Do not do that, because you can actually create a load that is dangerously light in powder charge. And the reason for that is this. When you have that finished load and it's going to come off the press, nice like this, bullet up. That's all. You just put that bullet in and it comes out like this. That seems just fine. And you'll shake it, and because it's such a light load, you'll hear that powder shaking inside there. But then when you go out to the range and you're going to fire that test load, it's going to lay horizontally or nearly perfectly horizontal based on, the muzzle angle and all that. Well, that powder then is going to distribute itself nice and flat, let's say also horizontally, inside that case that you just loaded. And what can happen is what's called flashover. When that primer ignites and the flash comes through that flash hole, from the primer can actually jump all the way across that powder charge and very very, very quickly, abnormally quickly, ignite the whole darn thing. And you're going to get these tremendous pressures built up extremely quickly inside of that cartridge, inside of the chamber. And probably the first thing you'll see is that primer wants to back out, almost fly out. Sometimes it will. Pressure spikes, large problems. And whoa, that was the below minimum charge. I don't dare go above it. Well, no. You cannot, do not go below that minimum charge for that exact reason. You have to have enough powder in there for that powder to act correctly during the firing sequence. So you're going to start with that minimum charge, and then you're going to work it up. You're going to work it up in increments. And what we ultimately like to see, and oftentimes it's kind of a rule of thumb, that we like to see a pretty good fill of the powder inside that case. Certainly at least 75% fill inside that case, and that's probably going to actually get you just above the minimum powder charge. And a lot of times you're going to get your best results when you start creeping up to about 90, maybe 95% fill, and that's an observational thing. We don't really have a really great way of measuring exactly the fill of that. But roughly 90-95% fill is going to give you that really good, optimal results. And when I say 90 to 95% filled, I don't mean all the way to the very top, using this as a demonstration. I don't mean all the way to the top of the mouth of that case, because we have to have space in the case for the bullet to be seated in. So when we look at that 90-95% fill, that guideline, let's say, that includes the amount of space occupied by the seated bullet. Okay, so don't think, I got to keep putting in more powder even though it's above the maximum, because 95% is the best thing in the whole wide world. And so I got to make sure the powder comes well up into the neck of that case. Nope, I have never loaded a single round of rifle where the powder is anywhere up inside the neck of that case. Just haven't done it. And that's pretty much a guarantee. You have far too much powder in that case, and that's also going to give you gigantic pressure problems and could be physical injury type of problems as well. So we don't want too little powder in there, and we don't want too much powder. Sometimes you'll also see in the reloading manuals or online an asterisk or a little letter C next to it, or some sort of note that says that this load at this powder charge is going to result in a compressed charge. I have shot years ago some loads that were compressed charges. Never really saw that gigantic benefit from compressed charges. It's really, really high pressure stuff, and I pretty much avoid it. No, I do avoid it. I don't use compressed charges, because you just make one little mistake on that compressed charge. You're right on the edge, right? You're right on the edge of that safety line. One mistake on that compressed charge, and now you're over that line. Too much pressure. You've damaged or destroyed the rifle or whatever. Well, you might be thinking, now hold on. I worked up my load. Yes, it's a compressed load. I worked it up. It works beautifully. I'm going to keep shooting it. Okay, good for you. Here's something to think about, though. Here's something to really seriously think about, and that is the effect of temperature on your load. What temperature were the ambient conditions when you tested that load? Well, probably a lot of us, we work up our loads in the spring and summer. Temperatures are 50, 60, 70, maybe 80 degrees, something like that. nice comfortable weather to be outside shooting and be out at the range. And so, yep, it works beautifully well. I'm shooting a nice double base powder, and that is my go-to hunting load right there. Yeah, it's a compressed powder, but boy, it's just working really, really well. Okay, now I go out hunting season. It's at about the freezing point, maybe at 40 degrees, maybe it's really cold. You're shooting a double-based compressed powder. That powder is going to act erratically in those really cold temperatures. The nitroglycerin is going to separate the two bases on that smokeless powder, and you're going to see, very likely, really outrageous pressures. Or you go the other way, either single base or double base powders, and you're out shooting at a competition, maybe long-range competition out in some hot weather, 90-degree, 100-degree weather, and you've got that compressed load. Pressure's going to peak up on you. They're going to creep up again, cause you some problems. So temperature is a really important determinant, and I'm talking ambient temperatures, air temperatures, are a very important determinant on how that powder is going to act. So some years ago, it became very common, was all the rage, and you still hear about it, and it's important to know about it, that Hodgdon and other companies came out with these extreme powders, or really what they were temperature stable or temperature compensated powders. Different manufacturers use different wording because some have been copyrighted and trademarked. But what that means is that this particular powder does not show a gigantic difference in its properties and characteristics over a reasonable temperature range. In other words, if I'm getting 2,800 feet per second for my particular load, and it's 0 degrees out here today, I'm going to pretty much get 2,800 feet per second at 100 degrees. Is that really absolutely true? Is that the reality? No. What you're going to see is that the temperature compensated or temperature stable powders have less difference in how that powder is going to react in cold temperatures versus hot temperatures, in contrast to those non-temperature compensated powders. In other words, if you graphed the velocity over temperature, this is 0 degrees, and you get, a certain 2,800 feet per second at the muzzle. Then at 100 degrees, you might get 2,850 feet per second with a temperature compensated powder. With a non-temperature compensated or non-temperature stable powder, you're going to see it go from maybe 2,800 feet per second at 0 degrees to 2,900 or 2,950 feet per second at 100 degrees. So the slope of that line is flatter with a temperature compensated powder like Varget, and it's steeper for a non-temperature compensated powder. Understand that and watch the temperatures as you are working up your load. And you should be making notes of all that in your reloading notes or journal, so you can refer back to it as you are then maybe further tweaking the powder charges and perfecting your load. That's kind of the fun stuff that we like to do. But of course, we always want to be crafting safe and reliable ammunition. Well, I'm taking a look at the clock right now. We're at about 24 minutes, and I like to keep my videos at 30 minutes or less. 25 or less is even better. That way you get a chance to watch the whole thing at your leisure and not have to end it prematurely or skip some fairly important parts. we made a lot of ground, covered a lot of ground today, didn't actually get to the powder charging process. That is the focus of our next video. The next episode of Extreme Reloading, we're going to jump very quickly into the actual reloading or powder charging process. I've got a lot of tips I want to share with you from 30-some years of reloading. Just maybe some small tips to make that whole powder charging process a little bit better, a little bit more consistent. Remember, consistency equals accuracy. No doubt about that is true. So once again, thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions, put those into the comment section below, and I hope to see you in our next episode of Extreme Reloading.